Welcome to Radical Feminist Perspectives. Today we are going to hear about Barbie Meets a Very Poor Thing, which is an article by Jocelynne Scutt, and it's being discussed by Jocelynne Scutt and Marian Rutigliano. So thank you very much, both of you, and over to you.
Thank you, Joe. Good. Now, Marian, did you want to begin with questions or should I begin with some
Um,
introduction?
why don't you get started? I'm kind of like the interested student sitting at the feet of the teacher because I did not see either film. Although my sister had a Barbie when I was a kid. Um, so why don't you start and I'll ask what I think are some good questions along the way as I read your the chapter that you wrote.
That sounds great. Thanks, Marian. Well, I should explain why I looked at Barbie. It was because it became such a phenomenon. And I talked about it with women I know and women who had male partners. And they'd all gone to the film with their male partners. And interestingly, the male partners did actually like the movie. Now, that might be a plus or a minus. I'm not sure. Everybody else will make up their own mind. But it was interesting to me as a feminist who was in the 1970s. I guess I was became explicitly active in the women's movement because at that time Barbie was seen in a very negative light. It was because she was slender, she wore high heels, she was pink, 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 which I'll come to the pink phenomenon in a moment. And I therefore wondered why it was that a feminist movie maker and actress who does have feminist inclinations, I would say, were making this Barbie movie. The other aspect that I looked at was Poor Things, which is the movie that Emma Stone appears in and for which she won the Oscar. And the contrast between the two was and is enormous. And Barbie, of course, win any Oscars apart from the song. And it was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, Ryan Gosling, and the song was nominated to get the Barbie song was nominated together with the Ken song, which is interesting in itself. The Barbie song and the Ken song didn't, but one more or less felt that the Academy had to square off Barbie with Ken because the idea that the reality is that Barbie is a very independent woman or a very independent doll if one looks at it from that point of view. And in my opinion, what the Academy was doing was actually endeavouring to undercut the independent nature of Barbie and what Barbie the film was saying. As for Poor Things, I have very negative view of that film, but no wonder it won the Oscar because of the negative implications of that film. This chapter, which is in my book, Women, Power and Autonomy, Rights, Respect and Representation in Law and Society, also alludes to Silence of the Lambs in a very short way, because I'm also interested in the fact that Silence of the Lambs, you see, was projected as a strongly feminist film, whereas Barbie would not be, although I think the implications of Barbie are extraordinarily feminist. But with Silence of the Lambs, I disagree with the notion it's feminist because in the Lambs, foster character, the main character, although her role is undercut by the Hannibal Lecter character in that. I mean, I'm hoping that people are familiar with Silence of the Lambs because, just briefly on Silence of the Lambs, the idea in that she is actually a feminist is not consistent with the role that, in my opinion, feminism plays and feminism works. The point of feminism is that we recognise collective engagement and women engaging collectively with one another. And in the struggle, we are together. We're not St. George and the Dragon, which is the Jodie Foster character in Silence of the Lambs. She does it all by herself. The only victim survivor with whom she talks, there's a very short interchange between her and a victim survivor of the man who's collectively murdering women, or is a serial killer. And the idea that within feminism, the way that feminism works is that we're all out there as St. George, and that defeating the dragon all alone is absolutely antithetical to what I see as feminism, which, as I said, is that collective engagement. So I think it was that I wanted to include Silence of the Lambs because I did want to make that point. But back to Barbie, and I'd like to make a comment about pink, because pink saturates the movie. Now, there's a website called Pink Stinks that was set up by women in the United Kingdom to protest against the disneyfication of little girls through the pink tutu notion. I understand they set the website up, and I understand why they're saying pink stinks. But you see, again, I disagree with that, because I think if there's a little girl in the playground wearing a pink tutu, we do not come and say, pink stinks, get it off. I think what we say, I would say anyway, is, isn't that wonderful, wearing pink? Now, when Attorney General or the Prime Minister, or you're a filmmaker, you're the director winning the Oscar, you can wear pink, you can wear black, you can wear whatever colour you choose, because if we say to the little girl in the playground, pink stinks, what we're saying to her is, your opinion's not worth anything. You are not a valuable human being. You're making wrong decisions about what you wear. And I don't think that we should do that. I think that we need to affirm, but in our affirmation, put in this other element that isn't, yes, I want to dance around being pink, although one is perfectly entitled to do that. And I'm glad that little girls do, because I think that movement, colour and so forth are so important to being human, and we ought not to denigrate little girls are doing. It doesn't mean that I'm saying let it all hang out and everything matters and everything's a-okay from a feminist point of view. And here I'll bring in that great feminist Dale Spender, who in one of her books does make the point that feminism does have principles, and we are right to say we have principles and we stand for these principles. And we are right to say if there is a woman who is not abiding by those principles, we're entitled to be critical. But at the same time, I think that rather than discounting something like pink or something like the Barbie phenomenon, I think it is worthwhile to look more deeply into what's happening. And that's what I wanted to do with the Barbie movie. You may have
That's pretty, I mean, that's very interesting. I think a few centuries ago, pink was a man's color, especially among royalty and the upper class, which it is no longer, obviously. I mean, one of the first things that you actually discussed in this chapter was Ken and his role in the film. How successful do you think that Barbie, the doll, would have been long term if Ken had never been created just a couple of years later? I mean, did it take Ken to make sure that Barbie really stayed solid on the market for girls' toys?
I think that's a really insightful question. So, it makes me think about what role Ken played. I think, to me, what's interesting is that he came onto the scene, and yet it's extraordinarily clear that Barbie is her own person. She's independent. She is reflected in many roles. She's a lawyer, she's an astronaut, she's a tradesperson. she's a journalist. She fulfills many different roles. And Ken is really like an add-on. I mean, in a way, he's a bit of a handbag fellow, but I guess that in many ways you can say that he undercuts the notion that has to have a man attached to her to be real, which is the way that we're brought up, aren't we? We're brought up to think that we have to end up with a male companion. I call it the arc syndrome, the notion that we've got to be two by two coming into the world or into the ark or into the society. And if we don't have a partner, a male one, then there's something terribly wrong with us. That's the ark syndrome, in my view. And so one could say that's what Mattel was doing in introducing Ken. But I think there is another way of looking at it, and that is that Ken comes into the scene. He does not affect Barbie's independence. They don't live together. She has her own house. Well, in the movie I'm now referring to, but she does not depend on Ken for her identity in any way whatsoever. But whether Barbie would have survived on the market without him, I'm not sure. I suppose that from a traditionalist point of view, and from the point of view of parents who wanted to think, I want to bring my daughter up to be a traditional person, he gave that opportunity to ensure that the market wasn't limited by the fact that there was not a man on the scene. But in defence of Mattel, and I think it's really interesting to look at Mattel, the producer of Barbie, from a number of perspectives. I mean, what I came across in all the research I did was that the Barbie doll is actually a replica of a German doll that's a doll that is a sexual object and which is on display in male bars and so on, which is really interesting because Mattel changed the whole notion of what a Barbie is by introducing the Barbie doll with her independent characteristics and her independent way of living and independent career orientation. And the other point I'd like to make about Mattel too is that in 1954, the United States Supreme Court made the decision in Brown and the Board of Education. And Brown and the Board of Education is the case where out of which came busing, the idea that separate but equal is not equal. The original notion that the Supreme Court had projected before Brown and the Board of Education, and right up to that time, was that you can have separate schools, separate shopping centres, separation on buses and so on, and that did not undercut the equality article of the Bill of Rights. Brown and the Board of Education said that's wrong. It said that separate is not equal. And what we need to do is to look at the schooling, because it was based on schooling. It was the Board of Education that was taken on in that case. We need to make sure that United States children are not isolated into African American schools and non-African American schools, because we're one society and we're an equal society, and that must be projected through the schools. Now, some of the evidence that was given in Board of Education and that led to the decision, the final decision, was that if you gave little girls, dolls, one was brown, one was black, and one was white. African American girls, Hispanic American girls, non-African, non-Hispanic American girls, that is, white girls, all of them, the vast majority, said the white doll was the best doll. And what the court said was that this is an indicator of the way that our society as an egalitarian society is being undercut. And we can't have that. Now, Mattel came in after the Brown and the Board of Education, and it set up a company that was headed by African Americans. There were two men actually, to run this company separate and independent of Mattel, though funded and backed by Mattel, which would produce Hispanic dolls and African American dolls. And Mattel gave two rules only. I forgot what one rule was, but the main rule was that the guys running this separate company said that when they made the dolls, they didn't want to have long straight hair. They wanted to have curly frizzy hair like traditional African American hair. And Mattel said they couldn't, said they had to leave it long and straight because the girls wanted to be able to comb the long hair. And if the long hair was removed from the African American and the Hispanic American dolls, then that would remove a vital selling feature of the Barbie. And they were making black Barbies and brown Barbies, this company. And I think that that's interesting in itself because, of course, they're a commercial operation and they want to make money. That's their bottom line. But they also did, I think, see that what was worth supporting was the idea of Hispanic dolls and African American dolls. After 3 years, the company had to be reincorporated into Mattel because it wasn't making money, which of course is instructive in itself because they didn't manage to overcome the dominance of the quote unquote white Barbie. But back to Ken, they obviously introduced Ken, Mattel, as a commercial part of the operation. They wouldn't have done it if they hadn't thought it would be a selling feature. However, I do think that just like Barbie is complex, the whole idea of Barbie is there's a complexity there and there are contradictions. I think the same thing with Ken, that Ken, as I said, could be seen as we're promoting hetero Barbie, but it didn't in any way deny that Barbie was an independent woman, a doll representing independent women.
So, I mean, explain how Barbie the doll, was she trying in the film to make Barbie the doll be consistent with or somehow reflecting early rumblings of feminism? I mean, real feminism, not liberal feminism. Is that what it is? Do you think that's what Greta Gerwig was trying to do, or did it succeed, or was it like trying to translate Barbie the doll hyperfemininity into an actual feminist?
Well,
Was it successful?
Yeah, that's interesting because if I could just, I've got the two speeches. I've got the speech that Gloria makes in the film that's seen as the vital feminist speech that's at the heart of the movie, and what the reports the speech was done 30 times by the actor, and she was nominated for a Best Supporting Actress. But I've got it here somewhere, because I'd like to read it and because I'd like to juxtapose it against another speech, which I think it's a pity they didn't use. But I'll read her speech first, if you just indulge me. What Gloria says is, it's literally impossible to be a woman. You, meaning Barbie, are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Like, we have to always be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong. You have to be thin, but not too thin. And you can never say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but also you have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the damn time. You have to be a career woman, but also always be looking out for other people. You have to answer for men's bad behaviour, which is insane. But if you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to be pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or that you threaten other women, because you're supposed to be a part of the sisterhood. But always stand out and always be grateful, but never forget that the system is rigged. So find a way to acknowledge that, but also always be grateful. You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard. It's too contradictory. And nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, that not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault. I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us. And if all of that is also true for a doll, just representing women, then I don't even know. Now, when America Ferrara speaks that in the movie, and when she spoke it on set, what they say is that the whole cast and crew and so forth broke down in tears, identifying, if they were women, identifying with that, and if they were men, perhaps sympathising or actually beginning to see the light. I'm not sure. But if I can just give this alternative, which I think is probably too strong for the movie, but it's written by Joyce Stevens. Joyce Stevens was a great Australian feminist and trade unionist. And this is what she says in her statement about because we're women. Because women's work is never done and is underpaid or unpaid or boring or repetitious, and we're the first to get the sack, and what we look like is more important than what we do. And if we get raped, it's our fault. And if we get bashed, we must have provoked it. And if we raise our voices, we're nagging bitches. And if we enjoy sex, we're nymphos. And if we don't, we're frigid. And if we love women, it's because we can't get a real man. And if we ask our doctor too many questions, we're neurotic and or pushy. And if we expect community care for children, we're selfish. And if we stand up for our rights, we're aggressive and unfeminine. And if we don't, we're typical weak females. And if we want to get married, we're out to trap a man. And if we don't, we're unnatural. And because we still can't get an adequate, safe contraceptive, but men can work on the moon, and if we can't cope or don't want a pregnancy, we're made to feel guilty about abortion. And for lots and lots of other reasons, we are part of the women's liberation movement. Now, both those speeches are really endeavouring to put across the same point. Of course, Joyce Stevens is much stronger, and it's a wonderful speech. It's on posters all over, and unfortunately, too often, it's not attributed to Joyce Stevens as it should be. But I think in that speech by America Ferraro, that the character she plays, the director and the direction of the film is to say, this is a feminist film, and this is a film that is projecting the reality for women and about women. And here we are, still strong, because when she gives that speech, she's surrounded by Barbies who are in the astronaut role. There are black Barbies, African American Barbies, there are Hispanic American Barbies, and there are the non, etc. And the whole range is the politicians, attorneys general, presidents, etc. So whether it's feminist I can understand that many would say no, because it's pink, because it's Barbie, because it's slender, etc. But I also think that it's worth going to see it to reflect on what it's actually saying, and the fact that it did get such resonance within the movie-going public and with women and even their male partners. I think it is an important movie, and I think that the fact that the Academy didn't recognise that is also proof that it's an important movie, because of course what they recognise Poor Things, which is absolutely a
Yeah.
negative film about women and not in the least bit feminist. It's an extraordinarily horrible movie, in my opinion.
One last thing on Barbie. First of all, I can just imagine, you know, people, or especially men, saying about Gloria that she's, remember the term man-hating women's liber. Um, yeah, but now if the Academy had adequate representation of women, I mean, would the Barbie film have done better, or would women have not supported another woman? And does having a woman as the featured character or woman director producer a priori decrease the likelihood of Academy nominations or recognitions? I mean, there's comments, in the chat about, like, yeah, men buy the tickets, and it's, I mean, is it just institutionalized patriarchy like it is everywhere else?
As for men buying the ticket, I think actually that more women might go to movies than men. I mean, I know that women read far more than men do. Women are the big buyers in the book market, and I tend to think possibly the movies as well, because it's possibly because we do actually like to live in a fantasy world, because this one is not so favourable to women. But as for women, the women are short on the ground in the Academy, and so therefore women's votes are far fewer. As for whether, if there were more women, the Barbie film would have won, um, that's problematic in itself, because we do know there's some really good work by Claire Burton, another Australian, on the way that women tend to be incorporated into male notions of thinking. And if you look at, how we've had the idea that on job interview panels, we can't have a job interview panel that's all male. And of course, that's absolutely right. We've got to have women on the job interviews alongside men, as well as persons with a disability and persons of minority race in the situation, etc. But what Claire Burton's research shows is that women, are much more likely to be egalitarian and fair, and sometimes that can bend over into seeing the male applicant as the one who should get the job, because they're bending over backwards not to identify with women. Now, that's of course negative, and that can happen. Also, it can happen, I think, and I do think this is what happened with Hillary Clinton. I mean, I had feminist friends who were absolutely opposed to Hillary Clinton in that first primary when she ran against Barack Obama, and they really were so negative about her, and they were even negative in the election where she ran against Trump, and were promoting Trump because, oh, Hillary voted for the Iraq War. Well, of course we all agree that Hillary Clinton shouldn't have voted for the Iraq War. I mean, who would say that that was the correct vote to do? On the other hand, is there anybody in our entire life with whom we have agreed 100%? I'd have to say absolutely no. And the notion, therefore, feminists were voting Hillary Clinton, I find extraordinary. She was the most qualified person who had ever stood for the United States presidency. She had a career. She is a qualified lawyer. She really is brilliant in so many ways. And she had, on top of all her own individual capacity, she had 8 years in the White House. I mean, why would you say that person shouldn't be the president? Extraordinary to me. But to come back to your point, women sometimes think, and this is the Hillary Clinton point I'm making, that sometimes, unfortunately, there is that spirit that can arise within us as women of not wanting a woman to succeed because it's so hard, and because had knockbacks and discrimination and sexism against ourselves, which every woman has, whether she recognises it or not. Some say they haven't, but of course that's untrue. We're living in this world. This negativity can arise. So I think it would have done better. There's no question about that. Whether it would have knocked out Poor Things or some other movie, one, it's difficult to say just because of the problematic nature of being a woman living in a patriarchal world and having been indoctrinated into patriarchal thinking. I mean, however good your family background is, however strong egalitarianism is within the family cohort from which you come, we're bombarded, as we would all agree, with negativity. And
Yeah.
I always think, if I could just end on this note, that the fact that we as women work together in the way that we do, as often as we do, because it's really a total rejection of patriarchal indoctrination, which we're fighting every day. So that's my answer.
Um, Poor Things. I did not see Poor Things and was convinced to never ever see it from your description of the film and how Bella is portrayed. It's like, yikes. Having said that, was there any misogynistic, infantilizing, dismissive of women's stereotypes that Poor Thing managed to avoid? I mean, that's what it sounds like it was from start to finish.
It's an appalling movie, and what's interesting is that there's a complete lack of understanding on the part of the filmmakers, the actors, the academy of what it's really saying. And it's based on a book, which is a terribly pretentious book. It's a Scots author, and he's billed as the top-notch Scots author, up and coming and confirmed and so forth. But there are differences between the book and the film. But a central feature of that film, which is never recognised, is that it's pedophiliac. The film is pedophiliac, because the whole point of it is that the main female character is pregnant and she commits suicide. She jumps off the bridge, and there's a protocol that's followed when people jump off this bridge, which is a common happenstance. And the protocol is that the body will be rescued, dead or alive, and passed into the hands of the particular doctor who is the main character in this, and he's perceived or projected as this wonderful character, Baxter. And so the body is delivered in, her real name is Victoria, but that's not the name she mainly bears throughout the film or the book. But she's delivered into his hands and she is dead. But what he does is remove the fetus, take out the fetus's brain and put it into her body. So she's got an adult female body with a baby's brain. And when she first starts engaging in sexual activity in this film, she's actually 3 years old. Now, what that actually says, that she's an adult body with a 3-year-old comprehension, a 3-year-old ability to make decisions, etc. So she's actually being raped throughout the movie, and it's sexually predatory conduct that's engaged in. And it's frankly horrible. Also, an element where that's true to the book. One element where the book is not followed through is that the character, the female character, does endeavour to educate herself, and she does so towards the beginning of the movie. In the film, she engages in this education when she's living in a brothel and in a relationship with another female character. And so it's really saying, this film, that the women should be somehow, the education of women is associated with our sexual being and our sexual contact and reality. And that means, as another element of all this, there are attempts to equate the book and the movie with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Well, of course, the point in Frankenstein is that the creature that's created sets out to educate himself, and he does so when he's living in a hovel next door to another hovel where they're educating the one of the female characters, because she does the same language as the country in which they're living. And there's no sexual issue relating to being educated. And that's true to Poor Things, the book, but it's not true to Poor Things, the movie. And so that's what it says to me about this movie, that it really does revolve around the whole issue of sex and sexuality, without the recognition that what it's actually about is the predatory conduct of men engaging in sexual activity with a 3-year-old child. That's why I think that the movie, I don't know, probably that's why it won the Oscar. Because what happened the next year? What film wins the Oscar? The one where the woman is working in the prostitute industry, being exploited, and it starts off in this way. It's really a pornographic movie, the way it starts off, and that won the Oscar the following year. So really what the Academy seems to be saying is that if we women operate in this sexually sort of exploited manner, then the stories that revolve around us are worthy of academic acclaim. Well, in my opinion, not.
I'm just, with all the awful things about it, were there any like technical redeeming qualities about the film in terms of character development, cinematography, or anything? I mean, it was, and to deserve the Oscars it won, or was that a concession to something or other? I mean, and you mentioned Mary Shelley. Was it even successful as a latter-day nod to Mary Shelley?
No, because in my opinion, the whole point of Frankenstein, which I've written about this because it's a very interesting book, Frankenstein, and it's really well worth reading. You see, the point of Frankenstein to me is that the reason it's feminist and that she is feminist in her perceptions and in her understanding of the world is because there are two elements to Frankenstein. The overarching notion is that there's this Walton who is sailing a boat to the North Pole, to the Arctic Circle, and wants to get through the Arctic Passage and be the first one that does it. Here's the George and the Dragon character. And the ultimate end of that is that the crew say, we're not going any further, it's too dangerous, the boat is breaking up, running the risk of it breaking up on the ice, and we must turn back. And against his wishes, really, in the end, or against his desire, he does, in the end, Walton, agree that they will go back. With Frankenstein, the same issue is here. What she is saying is that George and the Dragon is not the way that we are going to succeed in making the world a better place, which is what the book's about. Because Frankenstein the doctor is again a George and the Dragon character, inventing this creature that he is projecting as better than what nature has produced. And in the end, that effort does not succeed. And what she's saying is that collectivity and working together is how, as I said, we'll make a better world. And Poor Things, the movie and the book, it projects the idea that we've got to have a Baxter in the world to actually make the world a better place, when in fact St. George, the Baxter character, is not making the world a better place, and what he's doing is engaging in exploitative activity and projecting the notion that that's somehow an advance. Because at the end of the movie, there's another woman that's used in the same way as Victoria is being used in the initial, well, in the main body of the film. So nothing redeeming for me.
Someone mentioned, a couple of people in the chat, one said that the cinematography and the sets and stuff were good, so that's okay. But somebody also said there's lots of screaming and crying on screen, which if all I knew about it was that, I would say, oh boy, I bet a lot of men in the Academy think it's a great film only because of that. So I
I
mean,
say here, Marian, sorry to interrupt, but I
no.
went to see Hamnet last night. Now, Hamnet is projected as this marvelous movie, etc., etc. Have said that it's emotions in a manipulative way. I don't think it's a good movie at all. And talking about shouting and screaming, the major actress in it who's just been for the Academy, that's all she does. And what's so interesting is that her shouting and screaming, my internet's just telling me it's unstable, but her shouting and screaming is one level. And it doesn't matter whether she's shouting and screaming because she's given birth, as she does several times throughout the movie, or twice, I think, once with the Hamnet, and then, no, once with Susanna, sorry, and then with the Hamnet and his twin Judith. But her screaming when she's in grief and agony, the agony of grief is the same as the screaming when she's giving birth. Now, anybody who's given birth would probably say, "Oh, it's there's agony there," but I would have thought it's a very different screaming that you do when you're giving birth from what you do when you're in the absolute agony of your son having died, and so forth, but no level. And it's a terribly slow movie. It takes ages and ages and ages. And then there's also, and honestly, everybody switch off if you haven't seen it and you're going to see it because there's a spoiler. But during the beginning of the movie and through the movie until it comes to the end, there's a continuing repeat of a visual in the forest where there's a cavern and you can see the depths of the cavern. And this is a trigger for the end of the movie where Hamnet is reconstituted because he's dead, but he's reconstituted and he walks into the dark space on the stage from which the father has come as the ghost. And so we're meant to think, oh, yes, that's what this deep depth was all about. But it's so in your face. I think, as I say, it's going to win. She'll win unless something else happens dramatically at the Academy Awards. But on the screaming point, I'm making the screaming point that perhaps you're right, or perhaps the comment in the chat is right, that it's the screaming that won it. Women screaming, yeah. And
Um,
Barbie, of course, didn't scream.
there's an interesting comment in the chat that a redeeming quality about Poor Things shows you a girl child in a woman's body who has not been socialized into patriarchy. She doesn't know, she must submit, she's blunt, confident, horny, unsentimental, a voracious reader, and passionately empathetic of others, and thought that that was like was positive. Is that all true? Do you think that's positive or not?
Well, she's a 3-year-old, and I think that depicting a 3-year-old as sexually active is not fair because it's what is being projected, or it's always been projected by people who are pedophiles. And the notion that, I mean, we all know that children do have, if we want to call them sexual feelings, but that's a part of being human. But it doesn't mean, therefore, that it's a good old thing to be promoting it as something that's positive to engage in with adults. So I actually can't accept that as something positive about the movie. And I guess that it's really undercut by this idea that it's a 3-year-old brain in a woman's body. And I find it difficult to get over that. I suppose it's good that she is, as the chat comment has said, she isn't, she's not bound up by niceties and being polite and so on. But I think, I, I think, well, I guess I part company with the idea. I do think, I suppose that we can say, yes, costuming and production design were excellent on this movie. And if they'd won, I don't know if they did or not, I've forgotten, but then that was a good win. But then you see costuming and production design in Barbie were fantastic. They really were, because it was saying this contradiction of the pink, 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 and the high heels, and the fact that beautiful image at the beginning where Barbie it takes off high heels and her feet remain, in this shape, the high heeled shape. And what it's saying to us is that our feet have been corrupted by patriarchal demands that we wear these high heels. And I have to confess that it took me a very long time as a much older adult to be able to walk in flat shoes again, which I've managed to do, because you see your whole leg is corrupted by high heels because of the muscles and the tendons tend to grow short, to be shortened. I'm afraid Poor Things is problematic for me. And the other thing about it is, what's interesting, it's sunk to stone. I'm sorry about the word stone there, but yeah, you can't find it anywhere. I mean, maybe it's on the YouTube somewhere or other, but I saw it on the aeroplane because I knew in advance that I wasn't going to think much of it. So I did the fee to get into the theatre, and I saw it on a flight from to, I don't know, Singapore or somewhere. And when I went back again, it wasn't there. It's actually off the lists, whereas Barbie was there.
Good. You talk about a couple of other films in this chapter, and one was The Hurt Locker. I mean, first of all, it's about these explosive ordnance disposal soldiers, and I was in the military, and I met, and I knew people who were training for that and who did that, and their personalities were, I mean, were not like in the film. The EODs are very confident, very aggressive, but they don't freak out, fall apart, and things like that. But for The Hurt Locker, I mean, it was a good film, but what was the most, contributory, factors in the success of it? Was it because it was a guy's movie, yet made by a
I
woman or
think,
directed by a woman?
yeah, I think that was an absolute feature. I mean, it may have also been some negativity on the Academy's part towards James Cameron, because James Cameron and Catherine Bigelow's the director, they were married at one stage, and at the time, 2008, I think it was, they were married no longer. He was in for Avatar, and she was in for The Hurt Locker, and she won as the director, and very unusual for a woman to win. I think, I mean, I think I can't speak obviously for Catherine Bigelow, but she did do that movie deliberately as a counterpoint to the notion that women are going to make films about Little Women and so forth and so on. She Hurt Locker is interesting though, because it is more than a guy's movie, I think, because the Jeremy Renner character is a maverick who's come in to run this bomb disposal group in the Afghanistan war. And he is a daredevil and will go into where the bomb has to be dismantled and do it. He's working with a team. He's the leader of a team. One member of that team sticks by the rules, and that's not what the Jeremy Rema character does. The other team member is utterly insecure, and any minute now he's thinking, whatever I do is going to be wrong, bomb will explode, everybody will be killed. So interaction of these three characters does give it some character development and depth, I think, so that it's a guy movie, absolutely, it's a war movie, but like that movie that Three Kings, which was made by the man who's married to Amel Clooney, George Clooney. That's a war film, but it's got a lot more to it than simply war, because there is this psychological background and the interaction of the characters and what it means to be in war. So I think that she won was pretty much a miracle in a way, but the miracle was able to come into being because you're right, it's a guy movie on a particular level.
And the other film that you talked about was Silence of the Lambs, and we remember Jodie Foster, great character development for her, really, throughout the film, but kind of overshadowed in discussions about the film sometimes by the somewhat really one-dimensional Hannibal Lecter. So here you've got this incredible character development of Jodie Foster, and just like, the cartoon, evil cartoon character of Hannibal Lecter, and it's like, was Jodie Foster almost disregarded? Or not quite?
Well, yeah, I think a great deal of Jodie Foster as an actor. There's no doubt in my mind that she really is a great actor. And of course, you're right, the Hannibal Lecter character. And in the reviews, you see he gets so much space, and yet he's in very short dimension in the movie itself, both in time and, as you say, in quote unquote character. What character is there? That's another move that you see. What's interesting about film is that there is censorship right from the beginning, because what films get made, and that Silence of the Lambs was made, is indicative of what a particular cohort within the film industry thinks is a sellable story and a sellable film. And I went to that movie actually in the Burke Street Cinema in Melbourne, and I remember coming out and feeling as if I was walking on air, not because I was feeling great. I was feeling absolutely, how can I put it? Exploitation is the wrong word, but demeaned. And it's how I felt when I read that awful book, American Psycho. I had to review it for the Bulletin at one stage, American Psycho. It's years ago. But that book too is where you just think, why are these words on the page? Why are these words on this page being picked up by a publisher and being published when there's so much else that could be published that's so much more valuable? I'm not saying that we all have to have Pollyanna stories. I'm certainly not saying that. But back to Hannibal Lecter and your point, he did, in the reviews at least, he was seen as a central character, and Jodie Foster's character was extremely well, and she was fighting with the FBI as a lone woman against this patriarchal notion that women can't do anything and that we men are the ones that are in charge. We know what we're doing. We're going to solve this. And of course, she solves it, and she saves the future potential victims, non-survivors of this man who's another character that we have discussion about. I think it's not a feminist movie, as I said at the outset, but I also do think that Jodie Foster is an actor, and she acted so, and no wonder she won the Oscar for it. And it's good that she gets roles in other films that can project a more feminist approach.
Yeah, I mean, it just, yeah. one other thing, just as a matter of not necessarily about the films, but this whole academy, how does it work in terms of who gets to vote? I mean, do you come up and say, I've done this, I need to be in the academy? I mean, how does that work?
Well, now I should have researched this one. I mean, I did do a lot of research on the academy. You have to get membership of the academy, and that means that, yes, you're right, you do need to fulfill certain specifications. And this is why discrimination cases are so interesting, because what you need to look at is the duty statement of a job. And even before you're looking at who got the job and was she discriminated against, etc., because once you look at the duty statement, you can see that there are elements that are not directly relevant to doing of the job. And therefore, if they're in there for a discriminatory purpose. And if one looks at the film industry, I've got colleagues in the film industry, and I did a film degree at University of East London, which was wonderful, graduating in 2010. And with the film industry, although other areas, say law, say medicine, etc., women are making up the numbers in far more equal terms, although of course there's still discrimination within those professions. Fewer women are specialists in the medical profession still, and within law, women might become partners of law firms, but they're salaried partners mostly, not equity partners, and there's a huge distinction. But within the film industry, the numbers of women in directorial roles, production, all those other jobs, gaffer and so forth, production design, women are okay in the costuming, but even then there are many men that are dominant in that part of the industry and production design. And I think that that's why there's so few in the academy, because they're not reaching the duty statement that exists to be in the academy. And if they're going to change it, which they keep talking about they will, well, some keep talking about they will, others saying we've got to stick with what we've got, they do need to be more diverse, and they recognise that in terms of race as well.
Okay,
It's the duty statement.
somebody mentioned in the chat that if you win an Oscar, you're an automatic member of the Academy. Apparently.
Well, thank you. Well, that's interesting. Yeah.
Is there anything? Go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say that means, therefore, that there'd have to be equal numbers of women and men, at least in the acting category, wouldn't there? Because there's, unless we go to the notion that we can have the best actress can be somebody who really is a man. But yes, you have best actor and best actress, you have best supporting actress, etc. But in other roles, directors, that women are light on the ground, and those other roles I was talking about, the background roles, well, the production roles.
Is there just a few minutes left? Is there anything that that you'd like to add, or that you think is important in the comparison or the issues of Barbie, Poor Things? Any last parting wisdom?
I've got a really wonderful story, I think, about Barbie. You see, Barbie is not actually, in the end, the top-selling doll. The point is made in this unauthorised, I've got it here, Forever Barbie, and this is the unauthorised biography of Barbie. It's written by M.G. Lord, and the point she makes is that every year, you see, a new doll is produced. It was Cabbage Patch dolls at one stage, it was Bratz dolls at another stage, etc. And they're the ones that take the prime position in terms of being purchased around the festive season. Barbie, of course, is a long-term stayer. And there's this wonderful story that she recounts of little girls sitting around, and they've got the Bratz dolls, and they're talking about their Bratz dolls, what they're going to do, etc., etc. And then one of the Bratz dolls becomes ill. And what do these girls say? Dr. Barbie. We must get Dr. Barbie. And I thought that was a wonderful story, because what it is saying is we recognise Barbie for her professional skills as a medical practitioner. And the reading that I did as background for Barbie really did teach me a great deal, and it made me think sometimes we make decisions that are dismissive, and rightly so, in terms of what Dale Spender says. Feminism is not let it all hang out, anything's a-okay. But at the same time, sometimes perhaps we do need to go back and reflect, as I did in relation to Mattel. And also, just a wind up, I know that the time is short, but with that Brown and the Board of Education, there's another book that I read, and it's about, it's this one, Young and Restless, and the Girls Who Sparked America's Revolutions by Maggie Kahn. And she's talking about various revolutions, and she refers to Brown and the Board of Education. Now, Brown and the Board of Education, it's not recognised that that case was actually driven by schoolgirls, because Brown was the father of a schoolgirl who was saying, we don't want to put up with separate is equal. Separate is not equal. And the other, there were about five, I think, in that case, five claimants, and they were all fathers of girls except for one. And she talks about a demonstration that one of the girls led out of the school, marching up the road, and they were teenagers, young teenagers, who were saying, our voices matter. We matter as human beings. We are not going to be relegated to second-class citizens because we have the African American or Hispanic American. And that was really eye-opening for me too, because, I mean, I'm a lawyer and I care about Brown and the Board of Education, the United States Supreme Court, when they're acting well, or Warren Court, for example, which that was. They're brilliant. At the moment, I'm afraid that they're not, and that's really, really sad. But yeah, those are some final stories. Dr. Barbie, let's have Dr. Barbie, and the fact that it was young girls driving the Brown and the Board of Education and other revolutions within the American firmament.
All right. Well, thank you very, very much. We're out of time. This was great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you
And thank
so
you
much for
everybody for
having
being
me.
here.
Yeah,
It was our pleasure.
really enjoyed being able to let go. Thank you.
All right.